Hello, I have returned from the dead after a bunch of unhinged Melanie Martinez stans tried to character assassinate me. Let's talk about some comedy movies. The state of the modern comedy film has always been a very interesting topic for me. Before I became a journalist, I actually wanted to be a screenwriter, and I feel like comedy movies that I saw growing up all the way into my teenage years are what really influenced my wanting to screenwrite and desire to make those kinds of movies, and I think other people in the creative field would say the same. Some of my personal favorites are The Waterboy with Adam Sandler, We're the Millers with Jason Sudeikis, Easy A with Emma Stone, and sure, some of these films live in the realm of totally unserious and stupid, and their entire purpose is just to make you laugh. And of course, there can be some stinker comedy films as well. But there have also been comedy films that are really about something, and they're fundamental, in my opinion, to the current tradition of the modern movie-going experience. Comedies can be funny, but they can also hit really hard and make a real impact, and I think if you ask the average person, like, their top 5 movies, one of them will probably be something in the comedy genre. And yet, in the last 5 to 10 years or so, I feel like the comedy movie has become all but a thing of the past. The mid-tier casual movie-going experience has somewhat disappeared due to the pandemic, due to rising costs of what it takes to go to the movies, and so studios' response to that is to basically craft movies that are these big-budget blockbuster experiences. So nowadays, if you're going to the movies, chances are you're going to see something like a big-budget superhero film or something already based on a pre-existing IP. But there is still very much an appetite for comedy, I just think it's somewhere else now. A lot of the shows making waves right now on streaming services are comedies. Only Murders in the Building, Hacks, The Righteous Gemstones, and people still have their bingeable rewatch favorites like New Girl or The Office. So I was pleasantly surprised this summer when I realized that 2 of the biggest movies of the whole year with the most buzz were women-led comedies. Barbie and Bottoms are 2 completely different films, vastly different from each other in fact, but they both have been successful with their respective audiences, and I want to talk about why, because I feel like it could give some interesting insight into what major studios may be overlooking when it comes to the appetite out there for comedy. And I do want to acknowledge that me talking about these movies is a review in some capacity, even though this is technically a video essay. This is not a paid review, obviously, but I did want to take a moment to highlight the work of those who are striking for fair wages right now. As you all know, the WGA is currently on strike for a fair contract with the studios, and neither of these films would be possible without the hard work, dedication, and talent of the writers as well as the actors. If you'd like to learn more about WGA or SAG-AFTRA's fight for fair wages, I have more information down in the description box below. By the way, when we talk about Barbie, I'm going to be a little bit more liberal with the spoilers because I feel like everybody and their mother has seen the movie by now. When we talk about Bottoms, I'm just going to be going over the plot in a more general sense because I don't want to give anything away. So the most interesting thing about Barbie to me was that when all of the buzz came out about the film, it seemed like it was going to be the most palatable, mass-marketed, friendly family film of all time. And yet, when I saw it, I realized that it is actually the most chronically online film of the last decade or so, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Don't get me wrong, Barbie is funny. It's a comedy, which is why we're talking about it in this video today. The scene of Ryan Gosling playing guitar and doing the Matchbox 20 impression is probably the hardest I've laughed in the theater all year. But Barbie is not a universal film in the sense that everybody in the audience will take the same thing away from it equally. It is a film that is very much for the girls, but particularly for the girls of this time. In the most basic sense, the experience of modern-day girlhood is trying to be the right kind of acceptable and palatable for the male gaze or the patriarchy. Young girls don't want to seem like they're trying too hard to be naturally desirable, but at the same time, modern-day beauty standards demand so much of us to appear acceptable. Not even just physically, but personality-wise. You don't want to seem like you care too much about the things that happen around you, even if they are infuriating. Especially now that terms like feminist have become a dirty word in some online circles. And so these girls become jaded so much younger and younger than the previous generations before them. And that's what the core of Barbie was about to me. It's really about the relationship between America Ferrera's character and her daughter. The scene where Barbie has this confrontation with this little girl and she's clearly in her little edgelord phase and calls Barbie a fascist, only for her to come around and realize that the struggles she faces as a young girl and the struggles that her mother faced generations before fundamentally aren't all that different. It is a movie about the modern day state of the girl, and I totally got it immediately, but I understand if people were going in for like a fun fish out of water comedy, and that's not what they got. That very specific point of view is probably the reason for the disconnect with a lot of male viewers of the movie, especially the basement-dwelling ones with YouTube channels who had nothing to take away from it besides Barbie movie hates men. Which is clearly not the case at all if you have even an ounce of critical thinking skills in your brain. The movie also very much addresses how gender roles are harmful for men as well. But something else I find interesting about Barbie and why it sets itself apart in terms of a modern-day comedy for a primarily woman-centered audience is that it doesn't make women the butt of the joke. Listen, I love Mean Girls as much as the next person. I love Tina Fey. I love Amy Poehler. I don't think there's anything necessarily problematic about the original film of Mean Girls. However, I think it set us back quite a bit in terms of modern day comedy tropes that involve women. And I guess it didn't necessarily start with Mean Girls. You can argue that Heathers is kind of the same thing. But I feel like a lot of classic comedies, whether it be a movie or TV show, often pit women against each other and present them as catty, and they often have this not like other girls protagonist who pretends that she's above all of the superficiality and the plastics and the girls who get guys. And then all of the comedic support roles for other women are like fat, old, clumsy, nerdy, gross, generally unattractive. And I just think it's interesting that so many men out there complain that Barbie is anti-men, when every comedy movie of the early 2000s, even if it centered women, was anti-women. But Barbie doesn't do that. All of the girls work together to solve the main conflict of the film. Even Weird Barbie, who's supposed to be the butt of the joke in terms of her appearance, actually has a very instrumental role in the movie, coming up with a plan to help stop the Kens. And in my opinion, it's also a really solid example of representation without being too derivative or literal based on the Barbies' identities, or going the route of stereotypical comedic relief. There were plus-size Barbies, there were Barbies of all different races, there was a transgender Barbie, and they all just coexisted together in Barbie land, and they were positive and they helped each other through problems, and it was really nice to see. Of course, there were some chuds on the internet who had something to say about the fact that Hari Nef, who's a transgender actress, played a Barbie in this movie. Ben Shapiro in particular made a comment about how she had a deeper voice than him, and I just want to say, Ben, I'm a cis woman, and I have a deeper voice than you. I think my main critique of this movie is, like I said, it's very chronically online in some of the jokes and some of the themes that it's trying to get across for a girl in this modern day and age. And so I do think it might end up getting very dated. I don't know if it's a movie that people are going to appreciate 10, 15, 20 years down the line. This is another common critique with this movie, but the pacing is a little strange. I think it loses steam a little bit when Ken and Barbie go to the real world, and you kind of get worried that it's going to be, like I said, a classic fish out of water film where they spend the rest of the time in the real world and they have to try to figure out how to get back. But thankfully they get back to Barbie land pretty quickly, and I think the film picks up again pretty well from there. Ultimately, I appreciate that this movie embraces a lot of aspects of girlhood and femininity, and I think that's why it caught on so much in terms of the aesthetic and the marketing. And it was made with a clear point of view. Greta Gerwig, whether you agree with what she had to say in this movie or not, did have something to say. Unfortunately, it's pretty clear that Warner Brothers is already taking away the wrong lessons from the success of this movie, given the fact that they are in the process of developing a lot of other films about classic Mattel toys. And I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I think at least some of those are probably going to flop pretty hard. And that ultimately the message here should be that you should make movies with women and girls in mind. Speaking of films with women and girls in mind, let's talk about Bottoms. Bottoms is definitely a very different story than Barbie. It was written and directed by Emma Seligman and co-written by Rachel Sennott, who also stars in the film. Ayo Edebiri, who I absolutely adore, is also in it. The film premiered at South by Southwest in March of 2023, and as of last week, it had a limited release in select theaters around the country, and then this week it got expanded to more theaters. Bottoms was showing in New York City during the limited release, so I got to see it last week before a lot of other people were able to see it. This movie is fucking stupid, and I love it. It definitely pays a lot of tribute to the early high school 2000s comedies from back in the day that have pretty much gone extinct now. It plays on a lot of those tropes with everybody in the high school worshiping the football players, and all of the characters are supposed to be high schoolers, but they're all played by actors who are very clearly older than 16, 17. You learn very quickly that this movie does not take itself seriously, and therefore neither should you, and it kind of amps up and gets more and more ridiculous as it goes on. Basically, the plot of it is that there are two lesbian best friends, PJ, who is played by Rachel Sennott, and Josie, who is played by Ayo Edebiri, and through a series of misunderstandings, they start a fight club for all of the girls in the school in order to get closer to these girls that they have a crush on, but then the fight club becomes something bigger and becomes an outlet for all of the girls in school to express their frustrations and come together and learn how to defend themselves. It is unapologetically slapsticky and stupid and violent and over the top. And I won't spoil it, but there is one aspect of the film that is taken somewhat seriously, and that's the love story. For the most part, especially at the start of the film, PJ and Josie are presented as these awkward losers, and everybody knows that they're lesbians and they're social outcasts. But they're not mocked in a way that's overly mean. In fact, I think the script cleverly pokes a lot of fun at the common tropes of lesbian characters. But the two characters that end up in this sort of unexpected love story have a lot of genuine chemistry with each other, and the scenes where they're intimate with each other are so well done and tasteful, and they're not the butt of the joke. It's believable and it's charming, and it doesn't come across as fetishy at all, and I think folks who are part of the LGBTQ community who aren't used to seeing this type of stuff in a movie or in a TV show without it being some sort of over-the-top representation of a lesbian relationship are really going to gravitate toward this storyline and these two characters in particular. While this film did have a smaller scale release, I actually think it had pretty solid marketing in that it has a lot of unknown cast members, but the cast members that are well known are pretty well liked by the fan base that it's marketing to. And it is smashing all expectations. It has made a lot of money considering it is such a small scale release. There are people who can't get enough of it, who have gone to see it multiple times, and there are people in places who are really hoping that it comes to their theaters or on streaming. And I almost wish that it did get a wider scale release, because I think it could have hung with some of the bigger scale summer budget blockbusters and even surpassed a lot of them had it been given the chance. I couldn't find much as to why this movie got such a small scale run to begin with. I'm assuming it has something to do with the production and how it was made. It seems like it was a very small scale project compared to something like a big budget studio venture. But if anything, the success of Bottoms relative to its release size should show studios that they should be investing in these offbeat, chaotic, raunchy teen comedies that happen to have gay shit in them. It's clearly a winning formula, and there's clearly a market for it that will go to the movies to see it. And that's what you need. You need something that's going to draw audiences that normally wouldn't leave their house if they have something that they'd rather watch on streaming. And that's not to say that this is the type of movie that is in such a specific niche that it's going to alienate other types of audiences that aren't young queer women. For example, I saw it with my straight boyfriend, who also thought it was very funny, and there was almost like a little Easter egg treat in here for the straight people, because Marshawn Lynch, the former running back for the Seattle Seahawks, plays a very instrumental role in this movie, and he's fucking great. He's so good. He's one of the best parts of the movie, and I want to know the story behind, like, how he was cast. Ultimately, I think that Hollywood needs to take a very serious look at the anomalies in these situations and what makes people gravitate toward films like Barbie and Bottoms. Because not to sound alarmist, but the film industry is currently in a state of cannibalizing itself, and that's not even counting all of the shit going on with the WGA and SAG-AFTRA and the strike and the ongoing squabbles there. Superhero movies are not surefire bets anymore. They honestly haven't been since Endgame. And even other big budget blockbusters like the new Mission Impossible film or the new Indiana Jones movie were flops. It feels to me like studios are hell-bent on ignoring casual swaths of filmgoers who don't always want to see the next big-budget action flick or superhero film, or even the more highbrow avant-garde kind of stuff like Oppenheimer. That's not me shitting on Oppenheimer, by the way. I actually loved it. It's probably my favorite movie of the year. Anyway, I just think back to when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, and movie-going was such a common part of my teenage experience. Every weekend, I would go with my friends to the local outlet mall, and we would see everything from weird outside-the-box action flicks like Looper, or the latest big Harry Potter film, or even those R-rated movies that you would sneak into when you were 13 like Project X. I feel like a lot of people forget that that was the world pre-MCU, pre-DCEU, pre-Disney live-action remake, pre-Disney owning Star Wars. We went to see whatever was playing in the theater that weekend. And I feel like people are missing that. And a lot of that contributes to the fact that theaters are so expensive to go to now. I certainly can't discount that that is an aspect of it. And moviegoing used to be a more casual experience. But I think the only thing that can help, besides bringing prices down, is producing a more diverse array of movies. Stuff that people want to go see. Stuff that caters to specific demographics like the LGBTQ community, not in a pandering way. Did you see Barbie? Did you enjoy Bottoms? Let me know your thoughts about these two films below. And one more thing before I go, I quickly wanted to mention the debacle that has been the last 48 hours. If you're unaware, I made a video about Melanie Martinez. It's a pretty good video essay, I think, just analyzing the eras of that particular artist and what it means for a pop star to have an era in general. I really like how it came out. People are responding very well to it, but there is a small pocket of unhinged Melanie Martinez fans on Instagram who, I guess, attack anybody who is even slightly critical of her. And I was the victim of that attack because this one account posted like photoshopped screenshots trying to cancel me. It was a whole thing. I have a post about it on my community tab. But if you want to report this account, that would be great, because apparently this account has been doing this to people for so long, and Instagram has not removed them from the platform, and I, quite frankly, don't think that should stand. So, if you want to give this account a little bit of the red report button, that would be much appreciated. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Unless a fucking Melanie Martinez fan puts a fucking sniper bullet to my head. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Bye!